Have you ever wondered if one of the greatest medical discoveries in human history existed long before modern science even knew it was possible? It sounds like the beginning of a science fiction story. A powerful antibiotic inside the bodies of people who lived more than 16 centuries ago. No hospitals, no laboratories, no microscopes, and certainly no pharmaceutical companies. Yet when scientists carefully examined ancient human bones, they found evidence of something that seemed impossible. The discovery challenged assumptions, sparked debate among researchers, and opened an extraordinary window into the lives of people who lived along the Nile River nearly 1,600 years ago. But did these ancient people actually discover antibiotics? Or is the truth even more fascinating? Today, we're separating fact from fiction to uncover one of archaeology's most remarkable scientific mysteries. Our story begins in ancient Nubia, a region located along the Nile River in what is now northern Sudan. Although Nubia shared centuries of contact with neighboring Egypt through trade, diplomacy, and sometimes conflict, it developed its own powerful kingdoms and rich cultural traditions. The people of Nubia built cities, farmed fertile land along the Nile, worked with metal, created beautiful pottery, and established thriving communities that lasted for generations. Like many ancient civilizations, they also brewed beer. Today, beer is often thought of as a recreational drink, but in the ancient world, it served a much broader purpose. It was a common part of daily life. Brewing transformed grains into a nutritious beverage that provided calories and could often be safer to drink than untreated water. Families drank it regularly, and children may have consumed weaker forms as part of their diet. At the time, no one could have imagined that this ordinary drink would one day become the center of an incredible scientific mystery. Centuries passed. Entire communities disappeared. Their cities changed. Their traditions faded into history. But beneath the dry soil of Nubia, something remained preserved. Archaeologists excavated ancient cemeteries and carefully recovered human skeletons dating to roughly AD 350 to 550. At first glance, these remains appeared similar to thousands of others discovered around the world. Bones can tell researchers about age, diet, disease, injuries, and the challenges people faced during their lives. But these particular skeletons would eventually reveal something completely unexpected. Years after the excavations, scientists began studying the bones using increasingly advanced laboratory techniques. Earlier research, led by biological anthropologist George J. Armelagos, suggested that ancient Nubian skeletons might contain traces of tetracycline, a naturally occurring antibiotic. Because this claim was so surprising, many scientists wanted stronger evidence using more modern analytical methods. Extraordinary discoveries require extraordinary proof. That proof arrived in 2010, when Dr. Mark L. Nelson, Dr. George J. Armelagos, and their colleagues published a peer-reviewed study in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. Using mass spectrometry, an advanced technique capable of identifying chemical compounds with remarkable precision, the researchers analyzed bone samples from the ancient Nubian population. The results were extraordinary. The tests confirmed the presence of tetracycline preserved within the skeletal tissue. This was not simply a stain on the outside of the bones or contamination introduced after burial. The antibiotic had become incorporated into the bones while these individuals were alive. In other words, they had repeatedly consumed tetracycline during their lifetimes. Naturally, the next question was even more surprising. Where could an ancient population have obtained an antibiotic that modern medicine would not formally identify until the 20th century? The answer appears to lie in nature itself. Unlike many modern medicines that are manufactured in laboratories, tetracycline originally comes from certain bacteria found naturally in soil. These bacteria belong to a group known as Streptomyces. Under the right conditions, they produce antibiotic compounds as part of their natural biology. Scientists have long known that many important antibiotics, including tetracycline, have natural origins. The researchers propose that traditional brewing practices may explain the mystery. If grains used to make beer became exposed to Streptomyces bacteria during fermentation, the brewing process could have produced measurable amounts of natural tetracycline. People drinking this fermented beverage would unknowingly consume the antibiotic. One important observation strengthened this idea. The researchers found evidence of tetracycline in many different individuals from the population, including children. This suggested that exposure was not rare or accidental. Instead, it appeared to be a regular part of daily life. At this point, many headlines began making dramatic claims. Some suggested that ancient people had invented antibiotics. Others claimed they possessed medical knowledge thousands of years ahead of modern civilization. But this is exactly where careful science asks us to slow down. The evidence does not show that ancient Nubians understood bacteria. It does not show they knew what antibiotics were. It does not prove they intentionally brewed beer specifically to create medicine. Those conclusions go beyond what the research demonstrates. Instead, the study supports a simpler and equally fascinating explanation. Through traditional brewing methods developed over generations, this community appears to have regularly consumed a naturally occurring antibiotic. Whether they intentionally preserved brewing techniques because they noticed health benefits, or whether the antibiotic was simply an unexpected byproduct of fermentation, remains unknown. At present, science cannot answer that question with certainty. That distinction matters because good science is built on evidence rather than assumptions. Researchers report what they can demonstrate and openly acknowledge what remains uncertain. In this case, the confirmed discovery is the presence of tetracycline in ancient Nubian bones. The reason it entered their bodies is supported by a strong scientific hypothesis involving fermented beer, but the intentions and knowledge of the people themselves cannot be proven. This discovery also reminds us that many important medicines originate in nature. Long before scientists isolated antibiotics in laboratories, bacteria had already been producing these compounds for millions of years. Human beings often benefited from natural biological processes without understanding the chemistry behind them. Across history, people learned through observation. They noticed that certain foods, plants, or preparations seemed helpful, even if they could not explain why. Modern science allows us to revisit those ancient practices with entirely new tools. Archaeologists uncover artifacts buried beneath the earth. Chemists identify tiny traces of ancient molecules. Biologists explain how natural organisms produce complex compounds. Together, these different fields revealed stories that would have been impossible to discover only a few decades ago. The antibiotic mystery from ancient Nubia is a perfect example of how science continues to rewrite our understanding of the past, not by replacing evidence with myths, but by uncovering facts hidden in places no one expected. Something as ordinary as a cup of fermented beer may have carried microscopic compounds that became preserved inside human bones for more than 16 centuries, waiting for technology advanced enough to detect them. Perhaps the most inspiring part of this story is not that ancient peoples somehow possessed modern medical knowledge. It is that human history is often more sophisticated than we assume. Ancient societies experimented, adapted, and developed practical solutions to everyday challenges. Sometimes those solutions worked for reasons they could never have imagined. Today, scientists continue to uncover those hidden connections between traditional practices and modern scientific understanding. So, did people living 1600 years ago discover antibiotics? Based on the available evidence, the answer is no. There is no proof they understood antibiotics in the modern scientific sense or intentionally invented them as medicine. But did they regularly consume a naturally occurring antibiotic through their traditional brewing practices? The scientific evidence strongly suggests they did, and that alone is one of the most remarkable discoveries in the history of archaeology and medicine. The next time you hear someone say that the ancient world was primitive, remember this story. Beneath the sands of Nubia, preserved inside human bones for more than 1600 years, scientists found evidence that nature had been providing antibiotic compounds where archaeology, history, and modern science come together to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface.